Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank my colleague from California and the chair of the committee for working so hard on this important amendment to try to articulate and help colleagues understand what is really at the basis of it. So I, too, was surprised to learn that the McConnell-Inhofe amendment would overturn what has really been hard-won gains in fuel efficiency over several years. And I don't really understand, because the EPA's clean air standards through 2016 will save so much gasoline that car buyers will actually save $3,000 over the life of the car. That's because of the hard work that we have done here in the Senate on a bipartisan basis. I know our colleague from both sides of the aisle worked to get that last agreement that we did in 2008. And while we're doing this, we'll save 1.8 billion barrels of oil. So I was surprised to hear that this legislation, the McConnell-Inhofe amendment, would overturn all of that progress that we've made in the last couple of decades on cleaner air and more opportunities for fuel efficiency. And when I look at this, I look at our domestic automakers in Detroit who are making much more progress based on this new generation of technology. So they're actually, because we've said you have to have more fuel-efficient cars, you actually are now winning in the marketplace with consumers because of those offerings. And I know that the Department of Energy, for the first time, has said that we have reduced our dependence on foreign oil because of these fuel economy improvements. So I say to my colleague in California, it wasn't because drill, baby, drill that we got fuel efficiency and got off foreign oil. It was because we had fuel efficiency in automobiles that we were able to reduce our dependence. So I asked my friend from California why we'd want to go backwards on that. If we've made progress in better cars out of Detroit, if they've become cheaper for consumers over the life of the car, if we have made advancements in reducing our dependence on fossil fuel, why would we want Americans to pay more at the pump and have cars that don't go as far per gallon of gas as they do today? So I don't understand what kind of scheme this is, but why would we want to go back on that level of fuel efficiency and override that by this amendment? So does my colleague understand? Am I correct?
Well, I will answer, and then I will yield for further questions. I think you are making the case so clearly. The one area we know we can make progress on in terms of getting off foreign oil is cars that get better fuel economy. And my friend worked so diligently on the Commerce Committee, along with Senator Snowe, Senator Feinstein, others. We all worked, but my friend took a tremendous lead in this. Now, in this particular amendment, which is named something it has nothing to do with reducing or preventing gas taxes or something, has nothing to do with that. If this passes, and I hope it won't pass, and if it were to be signed into law, essentially takes the EPA completely out of the picture in terms of fuel economy, which means that all the progress we've made in getting more fuel economy, cleaning up the air, will be gone. And this little child here, gasping for air as it is going to be gasping for air, more air. Children are particularly vulnerable. So you're right on so many fronts. If we were to pass this, we would turn around from all our progress we just made. We'd stop the states from being able to do more on their own. And we would lose the competition in the world for the most fuel-efficient vehicles, which is so critical. Everybody looks to us. And consumers, as my friend points out, would miss out on, frankly, thousands of dollars a year in savings. My friend, I hope I've answered her question.
I'm just amazed because my predecessor, a Republican from Washington, was fighting for fuel efficiency standards in the 90s. So I don't know why we would be here in 2011 with a radical proposal to basically erase the ability for fuel efficiency standards. But I have a question about public health, too, because I think my colleague from California has articulated something that is greater than any economic issue, and that is health and clean air and healthier children because of that. And I don't understand why we'd want to go back on the Clean Air Act as it relates to the adverse health outcomes. I mean, why would you want to have more problems with asthma attacks, heart attacks, strokes, visits to the emergency room, all of these things? And EPA just came out with a comprehensive cost-benefit study on the Clean Air Act, and their findings were stark. They said it was something like the Clean Air Act will save our society $2 trillion through 2020. I mean, that is amazing. So when I look at that, and we're going to say polluters don't have to pay or adhere to the law, I mean, we're just going to cause ourselves more cost in the future with health care. So I asked my colleague from California, what is it that Senator McConnell and Inhofe think they know about this that is different than what the American Lung Association, the American Public Health Association, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Trust for America's Health. What is it that they know that those organizations don't know? Because those organizations are saying we have a serious health problem and let's make sure that it is addressed through the Clean Air Act. Are they just ignoring this issue?
Well, obviously, I can't speak for my colleagues. I cannot. But I have to just look at what would happen if this were to become law. And EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, signed into law by Richard Nixon, a Republican, overwhelmingly, and by the way, the Clean Air Act amendments signed into law by George Herbert Walker Bush, they would say to the EPA, you're out. You no longer have the ability to do your job, which is laid out in the Clean Air Act. This particular amendment changes the Clean Air Act and says, I say to my friend, to the EPA, you no longer can look at carbon pollution. You can't look at any pollution at all that relates to the climate change issue. And in doing so, they are in a frontal assault against the American Lung Association, the American Public Health Association, the American Thoracic Society, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Trust for America's Health. But I say to my friend, even more than that, they're going against the American people. And I wanted to share this poll with you. In February, 1 month ago, really 1 month ago, there was a bipartisan poll. Republican pollster and a Democratic pollster teamed up, and they asked the people what they thought about these very issues. 69% of the American people, this is not people in Washington State and California, this is all over the country, think EPA should update the Clean Air Act standards with stricter air pollution limits. The McConnell Amendment stops them from updating the Clean Air Act standards. As a matter of fact, it repeals the ability of the EPA to ever address carbon pollution, which, by the way, is a clear endangerment to the people. And I'd ask unanimous consent to place in the record EPA's endangerment finding.
Without objection.
And I'd say to my good friend and my colleague from Washington State, in EPA's summary of the endangerment that our people would face, they talk about the worsening of ground-level ozone pollution if the EPA isn't allowed to enforce the law, which is what McConnell offers us today. They say exposure to ground-level ozone has been linked to respiratory health problems ranging from decreased lung function. Now, we know kids even today, in all the progress we've made, kids who are born in areas that are close to freeways, I say to my friend, close to railroads, close to ports, have a reduced lung function. At birth, they have a lesser lung function. What are we doing here? How dare people come here and hurt the American people? That's what this is. This is about hurting the American people, hurting America's families, stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from cleaning up the air, cleaning up pollution. The people, here's this, 69% say EPA scientists, not Congress, should set pollution standards, and yet This amendment says, EPA, get out of the picture. We don't want you. We want to do this. The politicians, well, the people don't want this. And that's why I hope we will reject this terrible amendment that endangers the people. I continue to yield for a further question.
I thank my colleague because in my next question deals with technology, and one thing I appreciate about working with the senator from California is we certainly share an interest in innovation and the innovation economy and making sure we don't do things to damage it, since so much job creation has happened from the technology sectors and from our improvements. So I was really surprised to think about this amendment from the perspective of it would really kill those jobs in America. I mean, if you basically say you're going to allow people to continue to pollute and not adhere to the Clean Air Act, all those technologies that are about getting us off of those pollutants and diversifying our energy sources would no longer be incented. I mean, you and I probably would say we need to do a lot more to incent those and stop incenting those that cause so much harmful pollution. But the United States really is this largest producer of environmental technology goods and services, and the environmental industry has approximately 119,000 firms and generates $300 billion in revenues and $43 billion in exports. Well, it's just the environmental technology industry, so that's 119,000 firms, $300 billion in revenue, and $43 billion in exports. So it's a very vibrant part of our economy that's based on we want to do something about toxic pollutants. And if all of a sudden you pass a bill in the United States Senate saying we don't want to do anything about these toxic pollutants, even though the Clean Air Act says we should, and the Supreme Court has said, yes, EPA, you should, then all of a sudden you're basically saying, okay, how far are you willing to go in saying you don't need to deal with toxins and pollutants? So to me, the foreign markets in developing countries who are already getting an edge on some of the clean energy technologies would worry me that they would continue to make advancements even more with these technologies. So I don't understand why this radical measure, would somehow people think would, help us when the foreign technology market would continue to grow and we would lose market share. So I asked my friend from California, doesn't it make more sense to think about the future jobs that we are trying to attract because they're so much bigger than thinking about this in the sense of 20th century jobs? That is almost what we're advocating. Let's go back to saying if you're a pollutant, it's okay because somehow you're creating jobs. And the market opportunity, I'm asking my colleague, isn't the market opportunity more in these technology jobs and environmental technology jobs?
Well, my friend is so right. If this is an economic argument, bring it on to us. We know the numbers. You've laid them out here. We know the tens of thousands of firms that are moving forward because we have these laws on the books. The clean air technologies and the clean water technologies and the safe drinking water technologies are wanted by the whole world. And I just have to say to my friends who are pushing this, I want to tell them something that they don't seem to either understand or maybe they don't really want to hear. But I'm going to say it. The whole world is going green, no matter where you look. Walmart is going green. Walmart is going green. And I've had my differences with them on their policies on workers. Walmart is going green. And why? Because, as my friend said, it saves money. The whole world is going green. What does it mean? It means that everyone wants to save money. Everyone is looking for better energy opportunities that are clean. And everybody wants clean energy. If we back away from that, we are saying to China, go for it. You'll get the whole market. And we'll still be pumping for oil. And by the way, I have a message on that front. Oil companies have 57 million acres of land and offshore tracts that they already have a permit to drill in. My friends on the other side in another debate keep talking about, let's drill. Why don't they drill where they already have the leases and it's already approved? So that's not a debate here. What's a debate here is, why would we, as my friend asked me, turn away from policies that result in clean technologies that the entire world wants, clean technologies that support 100,000 plus jobs, no, more than 100,000 businesses, tens of thousands of more jobs. Why would we do that? And my answer is, to me, it would be a self-inflicted wound on our country when this is an opportunity. My friend knows, I think, John Doerr, who's a venture capitalist. He has told us for years now that if we invest in clean energy, if we incentivize clean energy, the venture capitalists will come off the sidelines with more billions than they ever gave to high-tech and biotech combined. So why would anyone support this amendment, which would just turn the clock back on fuel economy, as my friend said, on clean energy technology, and turn the clock back on our little kids who are struggling as it is with asthma? Yield for another question.
Well, I think my colleague from California, I also am interested in your opinion about this as it relates to gas prices, because people are out, I think House Republicans anyway, and maybe even the minority leader, is if we pass this amendment, somehow gas prices are going to come down. And we all know, because, you know, it just seems about almost every summer we have these debates about what will impact gas prices. But this measure, it's so radical. And when I think about, even if EPA continued to act on their fulfillment of the Supreme Court decision that they must act in regulating pollutants, which is something that rules on oil refineries won't even go into effect until December of 2011, and the final rules aren't even due until later this year. So we're talking about rules that don't go into effect till 2013, 2014, 2015. So I asked my colleague from California, how would that have an impact? We don't even know what they're going to be. We're going to wait until July, hopefully, to hear from EPA about that. And so somehow that's going to affect gas prices today. I think what we know to be true is that getting off of oil and having more fuel-efficient cars has reduced our dependence, saved consumers money, and allowed them to have a choice in the marketplace. We ought to continue in that direction, not this direction. But do you think that those rules going into effect are somehow having an effect today? Aren't we talking about people who have already written about this as false rhetoric in the debate, that it's not accurate, that this will impact the price of the pump tomorrow?
Well, my friend, of course, is right on target when she points out that, first of all, the EPA is being very cautious the way it moves on this. And they're only going after the biggest, dirtiest polluters, okay? And I think most of the people I talk to out there say, you know, my mother always said, clean up your room. And if you're belching all the smoke into the air, you got to take some responsibility for it, especially when you're making billions and billions and billions of dollars of profit. No one has come to me and said big oil is suffering because they were under the Clean Air Act all these years. But it's true, there is no pressing matter before us. And they are using this, the problems in Libya and the tragedy in Japan. And by the way, I'd ask unanimous consent to place into the record a statement regarding the situation in Japan at the appropriate time after this debate is finished and the votes are here.
Without objection.
Thank you. What I want to say here is, yes, the Upton bill, which is the same as this McConnell amendment, he says, Upton, a bill that would halt the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases would help stop rising gas prices. That's what he says, that this amendment before us will help stop rising gas prices. The nonpartisan PolitiFact, which is an independent website, looked at this, and I put this in the record. Have I put this in the record, this PolitiFact? If not, I would ask unanimous consent to place it in the record. When they come to the end of looking at Mr. Upton's claim that this would reduce gas prices, and this is the same bill as the Upton bill, they say, we find this claim false. So in this debate, I feel really comfortable Because I'm on the side of the truth. I'm on the side of the American people who are telling us, stop, Congress, don't tell EPA to stop enforcing the law. That's wrong. So I feel good about that. We're on the side of these children who we're protecting. We're on the side of consumers. We're on the side of progress. We're on the side of business. We're on the side of exports. We want America to be the leader. My friend is an innovator. My friend knows what it is to go to the capital markets and say, I've got a great idea. And she knows what government can do to encourage this type of investment. Government can't do everything, but we can set the stage. And one of the ways we set the stage for a great multi-billion-dollar economy to take off is by having a Clean Air Act that saves our children from these terrible air-gasping days, but also creates technologies that clean up our air. And my friend is so right. The false claim that this amendment is going to lower gas prices, I mean, that's been debunked right now. That claim has been debunked by people who have no axe to grind. And I just appreciate my friend coming here and engaging in this. Does she have any further questions?
If
Good.
you can indulge me on this, because
Good.
you know, I see our colleagues on the floor, and as a member of the Small Business Committee, I am as frustrated as they are that this important legislation that would help small businesses in America grow is being now held hostage by this amendment. I mean, I look at you know, this issue, the broader issue of discussion, as some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have said, as a major policy issue. Well, if it's a major policy issue and it's a major policy change, why should you try to hang it in an amendment onto the small business bill? I mean, is that for, you know, making some industry or somebody happy? Is that why they're doing it? Because if this is really, as they're saying, a major policy, then let's have a major policy discussion. I know my colleague knows that you and I both support legislation that would have a major policy discussion here. Some of that legislation has gotten bipartisan support, so I think our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been to the floor saying we should address climate and do so. Well, if that's the case, let's have that broad debate. Is that my colleagues' understanding that some Republicans would like to address it and are saying now that we need to address it and not leave it all to EPA? If that's the case, then let's have that debate, but let's not have a rifle shot amendment that basically guts the law as it's being implemented, but let's have a discussion about what would be a more flexible approach to implementation of the requirements to regulate pollutants. So
Senator from Washington poses a really important question, and that is, why are we seeing this kind of amendment on a small business bill? It's ridiculous, and it makes the American people lose faith in us, frankly. This is a bill about small business innovation. This isn't a bill that's about telling EPA that they can no longer do their job and protect the American people. This is ridiculous. We already know from reports how many lives have been saved as a result of, we have it here, and I want my friend to see this. In 2010, the Clean Air Act prevented 160,000 cases of premature death. That's a fact. By 2020, the number's projected to grow to 230,000 deaths. So excuse me, this amendment, if it were to pass and it stopped EPA from cleaning up the air, people will die, okay? If this is what you want to do, don't hang it on a small business bill. Why don't you have a press conference and say, you know what, we don't think this is worth it. 160,000 deaths, win a few, lose a few, you know? They don't care at all. But we care, and that's why we're talking about this. And I'll yield again to my friend. This is what they would turn away from, saving 160,000 premature deaths. That's documented in 2010 alone.
I would just have one last question for my colleague, because I think these attempts that try to carve out pollutants and give them exemptions are just never, good policy, because there's so much at stake for the American public who believes that our job is to protect them with clean air and clean water and to make sure that polluters, are regulated. But it reminds me of that 2003 energy bill that was kind of done behind closed doors when the whole MTBE debate, the additive to fuel, came up. And I remember one newspaper ended up dubbing the bill the Hooters and Polluters and Corporate Looters bill or something like that, because it ended up trying to carve out for the manufacturers of that product that they would be exempted. And it was a bipartisan effort on the Senate floor. My colleagues from the Northeast, from New Hampshire, I believe, and it may have been the senators from Maine, all said, wait a minute, we're not going to exempt MTBE out of this legislation as a way to get an energy policy for the future. So I asked my colleague from California if she remembers that and other attempts to try to do this without the public fully understanding what is at stake for clean air and clean water, and if she remembers that failure because of doing this, that really left the public vulnerable, and if there were other instances of that debate that she could recall for us, because I think it's very similar.
Well, there's clearly been a lot of moves on the part of the special interests in this country, the biggest polluters, to get their way. And they try every which way to get their way. Now, if they can make the case to you, or I'd say to my friend or to me, that what they want is good for the American people, that's great. Make the case. Who could ever make the case that stopping the Environmental Protection Agency from enforcing the Clean Air Act is good for the people? They can't. So what do? And my friend is right to recall these other attempts. They couch it in, oh, it's going to lower the price of gas, or it's really good for business, or it's really good for jobs, when the truth is, it's devastating for all of those things. My friend has been a leader on consumer protection. Oh my goodness, we remember the fights when we had the Enrons of the world destroying people by raising the price of electricity behind closed doors in a conspiracy to do that. Remember those battles we were in? These battles keep coming back at us. Do you know, I would say to my friend's asking me questions, but I would ask her rhetorically. In this bill, it is so radical. It goes after fuel economy standards and it says, no more. EPA, you're out of that. Can't deal with it ever again. Even though we know fuel economy, when you get it done right, it takes those toxins out of the air. Plus, you get better fuel mileage, and that's going to get us off of foreign oil. It takes that away. Chalk one up for the Middle East oil barons. That's good for them. It's not good for America. Yeah, chalk that up for them. We already know what happens to kids. Let's do this picture, because it just shows you the look on this child's face. We already know what happens to our kids when the air is dirty. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you take EPA out of the business of cleaning up carbon pollution and all the co-contaminants that go in the air with it, such as mercury, and I could list them, people are going to be really sick. But here's the beyond the pale what they do. In addition to those things, they even stop in this amendment the carbon registry, so that America, you might as well cover your eyes, cover your ears, and cover your mouth, because you will not speak evil, you will not hear evil, you will not see evil, you will not see, you will not hear, and you cannot speak about the carbon pollution in the air. That's what's going on here. So my friend is right to connect this to a whole line of faulty reasoning that the American people have been asked to swallow, but I've got news for you. They're smart. 69% think EPA should update the Clean Air Act standards with stricter air pollution limits. 68% believe that Congress should not stop EPA from enforcing the Clean Air Act. And 69% believe that EPA scientists not Congress, should set pollution standards. So this vote we're going to have tonight, I hope we'll have it tonight, is really about whether you want Congress to play doctor and scientist and decide what is best for the people, or allow that to be done by the physicians, by the scientists, and by an agency that is extremely popular in this country. It's not popular right here, right now, I'll tell you that, because the polluters don't want anything to do with it. But we don't represent polluters. We represent everyone, everyone. And a vast majority want us to say to this McConnell amendment, no. So I would yield to my friend if she has a final comment or question.
Well, I want to thank the chair of the EPW committee and a great legislator protecting the interest of consumers on this issue. I serve with you on the Commerce Committee, and I see you fight for consumers every day. Your passenger Bill of Rights for the airlines and the FAA bill is just another perfect example of how you're thinking about how all legislation impacts individuals and their rights. And this is about the right to clean air and clean water, and to make sure that we are not going to cut EPA out of the regulation of pollutants business. I don't know why we would do that. That's their day job. They are supposed to regulate pollutants. The Supreme Court has said they're supposed to regulate pollutants. So I thank my colleague for waging this battle here against this amendment that, as she has outlined, has these radical notions in it. But I guess I go back to, we can try to keep hanging on to the past and saying that the past is going to take us somewhere. That usually doesn't work. And I would say that my colleague from California understands probably more than any other state, because of the efficiency gains that California has made in creating jobs and getting more out of our current energy supply. And the initiative that was just run in California, people were, I think that was about going back to the past too, wasn't it? That initiative, people said, okay, do we want to go backwards or do we want to go forward? And the people spoke in California and they said, let's move forward. So I would just conclude by thanking my colleague and asking her just one last time if, from an economic perspective, if America can afford this amendment. How could we afford this amendment if it's going to cause that much health care cost to us, if it's going to cause a loss of the advancements we've seen in the automobile industry? I mean, I would think that Detroit alone would, if you pass this amendment, would stop and say, wait a minute, do we even have to comply with the mile per gallon that's already on the books? Because it seems like Congress is saying that they're out of the business. So I would just say to my colleague from California, how can we afford this amendment? They would like to try to claim that as the only high ground of their debate, that somehow they're protecting jobs. They're not protecting jobs. They're basically trying to take 18th, 19th, and 20th century jobs and somehow say that they don't have to comply with clean air. And so I just, again, I ask my colleague if we can afford that kind of amendment, and just thank her for her leadership and tremendous support, because, you know, we all come here for different reasons, and we all are motivated by different reasons, but I know the senator from California is motivated by doing what's right for consumer and consumer interests. So I thank you for standing up for that voice that may not be being heard today on this important issue. So,
well, before my friend leaves, I want to thank her so much, and I am going to yield the floor so my Republican friends have time to speak on this. And America's going to hear a lot of different stories from a lot of other people. But remember, this is pretty simple. This amendment stops the Environmental Protection Agency from doing its job. And I want to thank my friend and tell her that we can't afford this amendment. This amendment will hurt America. It will hurt it in every way. It will hurt the health of Americans. It will hurt jobs in this country. It will hurt consumers. And I'm proud to stand with her, and I hope that she'll wait to talk with me outside that door for just a moment.